Now we can begin.
All right.
So I guess I would like to state for the record that my name is Ben Bauman and I'm interviewing Frank Biddinger, and today is Thursday, January 16th, 2020, and we are doing a digital oral history interview via phone. I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana, and you are in Charlotte, North Carolina, correct?
That's correct.
Excellent. And just for the record, I do have your consent to record the interview.
You do.
Perfect. Okay, so let's begin. When and where were you born?
I was born in Marion, Indiana, December 30, 1935.
Okay. And what were your parents' names?
My father was Thurman A. Biddinger. My mother, Florence McCann Biddinger.
All right. And where is your family from?
My parents were both. My father was born in Converse, Indiana, which is in Grant County, the same county as the city of Marion. My mother was born in Gas City, Indiana, which is also in Grant County.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. And do you know by any chance how your family got to Indiana?
No, my grandfather, on my father's father, was the station master for the Pennsylvania Railroad in Gas City.
Oh, okay.
My maternal grandfather, James McCann, had a grocery store in Gas City.
Oh.
And he was a Scotch Irishman. His ancestors had come from Ireland and immigrated to Kentucky. And then he immigrated, he left Kentucky and came to Indiana. My father's parents, I think, were Pennsylvania Dutch.
Oh, okay.
And I don't remember the county they came from to get to Indiana.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. So what were your parents... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to tell you, my father was also in the Senate.
Oh.
I think he was elected maybe in 1932.
That's right, yeah.
And he was president pro tem in 1943.
Okay.
When he resigned to join the Navy.
Oh, okay, wow.
To be in World War II.
Right. Interesting. And what exactly were your parents' occupations?
My father was a lawyer. My mother a housewife.
Okay. And did you have any siblings?
I have a sister who is 8 years younger than me.
Okay. And what was her name?
Betty Ann.
Okay. Betty Ann.
And her name is Cleaver now.
Ah, okay. So how would you describe your childhood growing up?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How would you describe your childhood?
Well, I think it was perfect.
That's good.
My parents were loving, and I wanted for nothing.
Okay.
And we traveled. We went out west a lot, and just had a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that sounds like a good childhood.
Yes.
And who would you say were the most influential people in your childhood?
Well, obviously my parents.
Right.
But I had other people that were influential, but most of them were relatives. Aunts and uncles.
Sure.
My mother had beside the family being a big influence.
Oh, okay. And I guess what about them made them so influential to you?
Well, for example, when I was a little boy, I was very frustrated. Before I'd ever gone to school, I couldn't read. I wanted to read the comic strips.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother taught me to read before I ever went to kindergarten.
Wow.
And, that's very influential.
Sure, sure.
My dad was a lawyer, and he took me to the office, and he talked to me a lot about the law, and influenced me in that way, and I always wanted to be a lawyer after that.
Okay, so just like your father.
Yes.
Excellent. So, I guess the next question is, what understanding, if any, did you have about your family's politics or political beliefs as a young child?
Well, I knew my parents were Republicans.
Right.
Because they took me to Republican meetings all the time. I like the cider and donuts a lot. But I later found out my father's parents were Democrats. And when my dad ran for office as a Republican, they disowned him.
Oh my gosh.
But that didn't last very long.
Right, right.
And there was never any conversations in my presence about politics.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So I guess now moving towards your education, what schools did you attend as a child and as a teenager?
I don't remember. My education was a little interrupted because of World War II.
Right.
I had gone to grade school in South Marion, and when the war came, my dad decided to resign from the Senate, which he did, and he turned his law practice over to his partner.
Okay.
And he sold the house, and we all moved to Philadelphia.
Wow.
And he was stationed at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. He was the aviation supply officer. And he kept trying to get on duty overseas. He kept trying to get on a ship.
Okay.
And he knew the two U.S. senators from Indiana. And I remember, as a youngster, him talking to him on the phone and asking them to get him on a ship. The first thing they did was get him assigned to a naval air station at Bunker Hill, Indiana, which is over, 20 miles from home.
Oh, wow.
And he threw a fit about that. I didn't sell my house and leave my practice to go 20 miles from home.
Right.
So finally, they called him one night, and he talked to them. And when he hung up, my mother said, "What'd they say?" And he said, "They said I'm too old and too fat to be on a ship."
Oh my gosh.
So that ended that. And he stayed in the Navy as an officer, a lieutenant, until the war was over. We came back to Indiana.
Okay. And how would you describe your educational experiences then?
Well, when we got back from Philadelphia, I went to Washington School in Marion.
Okay.
And that was through the 9th grade. And then grades 10, 11, and 12 were at Marion High School. I won't say I was a bad student. I just wasn't a very interested student.
Okay, sure.
And I loved to read,
Yeah, okay.
And I hated mathematics.
Yeah, that's probably pretty common, yeah.
And after high school, I went to Indiana University.
Oh, okay.
My
Great.
dad always says, I'll send you any place you want to go as long as it's a land-grant college in Indiana. Well,
okay.
that didn't leave much.
Nope.
And I got a bachelor's and went in the Army for 3 years.
Wow.
And when I came back, I went to law school and graduated in 1960.
That's fantastic. So, when you were a student in school, did you have any extracurricular activities at all, or?
Oh, yeah, but I don't remember much about them.
Oh, okay.
There was in law school, I was a member of a legal fraternity. I think it was Phi Delta Phi, but I'm not sure of that now. I just have lost touch with all of that.
Right.
And, but there was always a lot of things going on.
Right, right. So, was your bachelor degree in law as well?
No, it was in social service.
Social service, okay.
Yeah.
And how did you, I guess, what made you get interested in the social service major? Was it because you wanted to go to law school later, or?
It was because I could get a degree in that without taking a foreign language.
Ah, okay.
Now I wish I'd had a foreign language.
Yeah. So, did you know after getting your bachelor's degree that you wanted to go to law school?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in college, were you involved in any clubs or organizations, or?
No, I got married at age 20.
Oh, okay.
So I was still an undergraduate.
Right. So, how did you view your college experiences at the time when you were studying?
Oh, I thought they were great. My upstairs neighbor was Birch Bayh.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, in fact, he was made Speaker of the House while he was still in law school.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. He and Marvella, his first wife, lived up above us.
Wow. So, in college, did you already start to develop sort of a political identity, or what was your awareness of politics at the time?
Well, wasn't very active.
Okay.
I was aware of politics. I followed it, but I can't say that I was active.
Okay. All right. So, did you? I suppose you didn't have many conversations with your family about politics or anything at the time, or?
No, not many.
Okay. So, what was your first job out of college and law school?
I practiced law with my father.
Wow, okay. Excellent.
And we had a two-man firm and later on a three-man firm. And then I served in the Senate at that time. And then later on, I left the firm and went to Indianapolis where I was a lawyer.
Okay.
And I practiced utility law.
Interesting.
I was a lawyer for AT&T was a client. And I was the first lawyer for Verizon in Indiana. It was then called General Telephone something.
Oh, okay.
But then it became Verizon. And so I did a lot of utility work for a lot of utilities.
Sure.
Big ones and small ones.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. So I guess the next one.
And then after a few years, there was an Indiana Gas Association.
Oh, okay.
And I was asked if I would run it, and I said yes. So I left the practice, and I think for something like 16 years, I was president of the Indiana Gas Association. It has since been merged with the Electric Association.
Okay.
And I think it's called the Energy Association now.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So, moving back to your family, what year did you get married?
1956.
1956. Okay. And what was your wife's name?
Mary Lou.
Mary Lou. Okay.
And her maiden name was Liepse, Liepse.
Okay. And did you have any children?
We have two daughters. One still in Indiana, lives in Noblesville.
Okay.
And the other one is in South Carolina, about 30 minutes from where we are.
Oh, okay. And what were their names?
The one in Indiana is Nancy, still Nancy Biddinger.
Okay.
The one here in South Carolina is Jennifer Funk, F-U-N-K.
Okay. And were they both born in Indiana, or?
No, Jennifer was born in Germany when I was in the Army.
Ah, okay. Wow. Interesting.
Nancy was born in Indiana.
Okay. So did your family have much impact on your career?
Well, I don't know how to think about that.
Yeah, I guess perhaps did your career development change after having a family?
I think my children were upset when I lost the bid for re-election. I wasn't, but they were.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So yeah, I guess now turning towards politics, how did you first become more seriously involved in politics?
That's a good question. Well, in those days, you could not if you were a lawyer, you couldn't advertise.
Okay.
And the only way to get noticed, or the usual way to get noticed, was to run for office. And people would get to know your name, and they get to know you're a lawyer, and they might hire you.
Interesting.
And my dad encouraged me to run for office. He did not encourage me to get elected.
Wow.
And after I got elected, he said, "You dummy, you weren't supposed to get elected. You're supposed to just run."
Wow. So.
And now, of course, you can advertise.
Right. So when you first ran for office, was it more because you wanted to get your name out there as a lawyer, or was it because...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't think I had it. I thought I had no chance of winning.
Surprise, yeah.
It was a surprise.
So what shaped your political outlook?
I think just my life experiences. I don't consider myself liberal, or I guess I consider myself conservative,
right.
But I have a lot of liberal viewpoints, so who knows?
Sure.
I think it's just the things that happen to you in life.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
When I was first practicing law, if I had a woman come in who was pregnant and wanted an abortion, it was against the law for me to advise her on how to get that abortion. And it was against the law for her to have an I'd get on the airplane and go to New York.
Wow.
Because in New York, you can get abortions without going to jail.
Right. True.
And one of the first, one of the first bills I introduced was a liberalized abortion law in Indiana.
Interesting.
And that's, of course, that's why I wanted to do that, was because of my experience as a lawyer.
Right.
And seeing women in trouble. And one other thing I did, I introduced a bill to allow women to sit at bars. And when I was first elected in that era, a woman could not go in a tavern and sit at the bar.
Wow.
She could sit at a table, but not at the bar. And I just thought that was stupid.
Right. Wow.
And now, that's not the kind of bill you introduce when you want to get elected, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
I just thought it was the right thing to do.
So.
But that's another thing that shapes your view of politics.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm sure that has quite the impact. So when talking about your first bill that you sponsored, the abortion bill, what was the reaction across the board in the legislature when you introduced that bill?
I don't think there was one.
Okay. Was it?
It was just one of many bills.
Yeah. So
and it passed.
Right. So it really wasn't debated much, or?
No.
Okay. Interesting. So, in your career as a politician, and as you became more involved in politics, what were the key issues or legislation that you sponsored or fought against?
The one that comes to mind every time I think about it,
Yeah.
is, again, when I was a young lawyer, when I was a young senator, I think I was only 29 when I was elected. We elected in Indiana appellate and Supreme Court judges. They had to run for office. I think my predecessor in the Senate, who was a friend of mine, a judge, may have introduced a constitutional amendment to change that from electing judges to appointing them.
Okay.
And I sponsored it in the Senate. And after it passed, I became president of an organization that was trying to get people to vote for it. And
okay.
I went all over the state doing that. And it passed.
Wow.
And that's how we select judges today, as far as I know, anyway, unless something's changed.
Yeah. So, what was the primary reason then for this bill? Could you describe it for people that aren't familiar with it?
Well, I think it was to try to get the most qualified men or women who wouldn't be influenced in their decision making by having to run for office.
Right.
And left it up to a committee to select candidates, and then the governor to choose from those candidates. And then I think it's every 10 years they are on the ballot whether to retain them in office or not. And I think they almost always retain them.
Interesting. Wow. So my next question is, did you have any national political heroes or any state or local political heroes?
That's a good question, and I've never thought about it. I really haven't.
Okay.
I'm an admirer of Ronald Reagan.
Right.
Of the old senator from Illinois who was the head of the Senate for years, Dirksen.
Okay.
I always admired him. I guess my dad would have been my local hero.
Sure.
He, by the way, ran for mayor in 1947.
Wow. Okay.
And lost by 2 votes.
Oh my gosh.
And he refused to have a recount.
Yeah.
He said to the press, if I have a recount, I might lose by 3 votes. and the Indianapolis News, which no longer exists, named him Sportsman of the Year.
Wow.
for not having the recount.
Oh my gosh.
I always thought that was a funny story.
That is funny.
And he is just kind of a hero of mine.
Oh, of course, definitely. So going back to, I guess, right before you officially became a politician, I know you mentioned already that you're mostly trying to get your name out there when you ran for the Senate, but what did your campaign emphasize?
The sales tax had just been started in Indiana.
Okay.
Prior to that time, there was no sales tax.
Right.
And I ran on, well, several things, but one of them was getting rid of the sales tax on groceries.
Oh, okay.
And got it done. Got elected, got it done.
Wow.
And that seems to be the one I remember the most.
Right. And how would you describe your campaign strategy?
I don't know that I had much of a strategy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I went to meetings where, Republican meetings or other meetings where I could speak, and I was asked to speak, and my opponent was asked to speak.
Right.
And we would debate. I ran in both elections against Wayne Townsend.
Okay.
Who had been in the House before that. And he was from the Hartford City area.
Interesting. Okay. So what was your first election day like?
Well, it was a surprise.
Yeah, I bet.
I think I worked. I went to the office and worked. I didn't go out to the polls or anything.
Right.
And
how did you?
And then when they counted the votes, my dad was mad at me for getting elected.
Right. And how did you feel about that?
Oh, I was kind of excited.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought that'd be a neat thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And I look forward to it. And it was a great experience. I love being in the Senate. I had a lot of friends, and I hope I did some good,
Now, what were your thoughts on the next election cycle that you were in?
Well, I had the same opponent.
Yep.
And I didn't in the first election, I had $50 to run on.
Wow.
Of my own money.
Wow.
And somebody gave me maybe $100. And in the second election, I didn't raise some money, people would have fundraisers for me. But it still wasn't much money.
Right.
He did a little advertising in the newspaper. I don't think there was any TV at the time.
Sure.
Or if there was, nobody used it. I don't think it was much of a campaign.
Okay.
And I lost by a couple hundred votes.
Right. Okay. So.
And I never ran again.
Yeah.
Even though my friends in the Senate changed the district to give me what would have been a surefire seat, and I just thought by that time I was busy practicing law and doing other things.
Okay.
I just didn't have the time.
Interesting. So, when you were first elected, what were you thinking when you walked into the State House the first time as a senator?
Well, I guess I'd probably been there before, but I was kind of impressed. I thought it was kind of a neat building.
Right.
And I looked forward to being a senator and being called senator. I thought it was kind of nice. And everybody I met was nice. I liked Republicans and Democrats. Probably my best friend in the Senate was a Democrat.
Oh, okay.
I think I liked everybody I met. The staff was wonderful. And, in those days, now, even later on in my career, they had a whole office full of people that helped write legislation and, prepare it and shape it. In those days, they used a part-time attorney who came from Huntington, Indiana, and I can't remember his name. And he would I'd say to him, I want a bill that does this and this and this. And he'd say, okay, be right back. And he'd go in and pull out a bill just like it. That had already been introduced years ago.
Oh, wow.
And say, how about this? I'd say, how'd you do that? He said, oh, there's nothing new, everything.
Oh my gosh.
But I always thought that was funny.
That is funny. What were your expectations for the legislative process when you first started as a senator?
I don't know that I had much because I had never watched the legislative process.
Okay.
I was 29 years old. I'd been busy practicing law and 3 years in the Army and,
right.
Raising a family. And I don't know that I had any expectations.
Sure. Did the process seem complicated at all, or?
No, not particularly.
No? Okay, good. And so how did you exactly learn sort of the ins and outs of state politics when you were there?
Mostly by listening. They had a very active, I can't remember his name. I should. Republican County Chairman in Indianapolis. And a very active one in my hometown, who also was a lawyer.
Okay.
And I learned an awful lot from the two of them. And by keeping my eyes and ears open.
Right. So, how did you know the needs and wants of your constituents?
Well, they let you know that pretty early.
Yeah.
There were, I got a lot of phone calls. I got a lot of letters.
Right.
Not as many as I thought I would get.
Oh, okay.
But I got some.
And how would you respond to them?
I would call them or write them, and if I liked what they wanted, if I thought it was doable, I would ask that a bill be prepared to do that.
Right.
And maybe send them a copy of it and tell them I was going to introduce it and would try to pass it.
Okay. So when you were interacting with other assembly members, what were the interactions typically like, formal and informal?
Well, they were mostly informal.
Okay.
We all knew each other by our first names.
Right.
We were not formal about talking about anything. If I had a bill and I wanted their vote, I would just go to them.
Okay.
And say, I'd like your vote on this bill. And if they wanted to know more about it, if they didn't want to take my word, I'd be happy to tell them
Right.
what the effects were and why and explain it to them. And after a while, you know who to talk to and who not to talk to, because some people aren't gonna listen to you.
Right.
For whatever reason. Maybe the subject matter, maybe something else.
What were the interactions typically like between the different parties?
There's very little difference between the parties. It's not like Congress. It's not like what you see on TV every night.
Right.
In our legislature, I consider virtually everybody a friend of mine.
Wow.
And we'd go out and eat together and tell jokes. And I said that a Democrat was my best friend.
Yeah.
And we remained friends till he died, and he died way too young. He died at age 66, and I was a good friend of his all of the rest of his life, and I knew his wife and I knew his kids. But I had another senator who ran for governor. Hell, he was great. I loved him. A guy named Bob Fair.
Mm-hmm.
From southern Indiana. He was funny and he was a good lawyer. I even gave him some money to run for governor.
Wow. And what was your best friend's name again?
Bob Mahold.
Bob.
Mahowald.
Okay.
He was from South Bend. Great guy. Had a leather store.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, were there any differences between members of the House and Senate?
Not many. No.
Okay.
Different, do you mean ill feelings or?
Yeah, I suppose anything that might sort of suggest to someone that they sort of acted differently, perhaps, or the organization was different. What would you say?
Well, I was a very good friend of the Speaker of the House, Otis Bowen, and in fact, I spoke at I think his first campaign event, although it wasn't called that, in his hometown. And why they got me, I'll never know, but I was happy to do it. And I had a lot of friends that were in the House, both Republican and Democrat. When you're there, you don't think about that.
Right.
It's all you want is their name and their friendship.
Sure. That's great. Who was your seatmate in the Senate?
I sat next to
Sure.
my reading glasses.
No problem. Looks like you sat next to maybe Harrison and Snowden.
Yeah, it was Snowden I was trying to think of. Yeah, Joe Harrison was a long-serving Republican senator, and he was a graduate of the Naval Academy. And I remember going to a Notre Dame Navy game with he and his wife. They were good people.
Wow, okay.
Gene Snowden was funny.
Yeah?
Gene Snowden had a new joke every day. They weren't all funny, but they were all jokes. None of them were dirty. They're all clean.
Yeah.
And he was a great guy. But how he had so many jokes, I'll never know.
Oh my gosh. That's great. So changing gears a little bit, could you walk me through the general process of generating a bill?
Well, first you have to have an idea.
Right.
And you might get that from a constituent, or you might get it from your personal experience. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to have a thought about a bill. And then you would, I like to write my own bills. I'm a lawyer, and I think I know how to write.
Of course.
Bills. I would then take it to that lawyer I was telling you about that worked for us, or to the group that succeeded him, and they would try to shape it up and bring it back to me, and I'd look at it, and if it wasn't what I wanted, I'd tell them why, or I would change it. And then you submit it, when you're ready, you submit it to, as I recall, to the front desk, and it gets distributed to everybody.
Okay.
And it gets assigned to a committee by the pro tem and or the leader, and it goes to that committee, and there are hearings on it. I was a committee chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and if it would come to my committee, we would have a hearing.
Right.
And I would speak in favor of it, and if somebody wanted to speak against it, they were welcome to. And at some point, we'd take the vote on whether to vote it out or not.
Mm-hmm.
You vote it out, it goes on the floor, and it gets called for a vote, and you debate it.
Interesting.
And then at some point, and there's an opportunity to amend it.
Right.
From the floor, and after that it's voted on, yea or nay, and if it passes, it goes to the House, and through that same process over there.
And how would you garner support for any legislation you came up with?
Almost all of it, I just counted on my speaking on the floor for it.
Right.
To be enough. If I thought something was controversial, or if somebody raised a question about it, I would go to them.
Okay.
And talk to them about it.
Interesting. And how was legislative business conducted outside of formal votes and committee meetings?
Well, I'm not sure I know how to answer that.
I suppose.
You know, you have access to your compatriots, and you can talk about it at any time,
Right.
on or off the floor.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fair. And did you have a sense of how people would vote prior to actually voting?
Yes, almost always. There were very few surprises.
Okay, and why was that?
Well, you got to know people, and you got to know what you thought their reaction would be,
Sure.
and what they thought, what they thought about the particular area you were in. If it was a criminal bill of some kind, you knew who was very likely to vote for a bill that was going to put somebody in jail. There are a lot of hard-nosed people in there.
Right. And what role did party leadership play in the legislative process?
Very little.
Okay.
I don't recall a party leader. Maybe one time coming to me and saying, you really need to support this or that.
Okay.
It's just not, there's not much politics there. At least when I was there wasn't.
Right. So, I guess in the big picture, when it comes to the relationship between the General Assembly and the general public, what would you say the general public does not know about the Indiana General Assembly and how it operates?
I don't think they know anything about it.
Yeah?
I think they are clueless.
Yeah.
I would be at home on a weekend, and more than almost always people would say to me, well, aren't you supposed to be in Washington?
Oh my gosh.
They all thought I was a U.S. Senator, I guess. They didn't know the difference between a state senator and a U.S. senator.
Wow.
And they just don't. And I'm living now in a building full of people in their 80s and more, and they don't either.
Wow.
They just don't know.
Yeah, wow. That's really interesting. What about?
I'm always surprised at how little people know about government.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah, go for
One
it.
time, my wife and I and her parents went on a trip. And we went to Myrtle Beach, and we went to Washington, D.C. And the parents couldn't get over Washington, D.C. They thought the U.S. government was run out of the White House. They thought the whole government was in the White House.
Oh my gosh.
They didn't know there was a Congress, not really. They'd heard of it, but they didn't think about it.
Wow.
They didn't know there was an agricultural building,
Sure.
And that's the way most people think.
Wow.
And I don't know if it's because the schools don't teach it, or people just don't care. I don't know.
Right. So, speaking of family, did your legislative service have an impact on your family life at all?
Not much.
Okay.
Not much, because I was home every weekend. It's not as though you have to fly back from Washington. I was 60 miles away,
Right.
and
So,
And then one time, my dad called me, and he had to open an estate, and it was a will that I had written, and I was one of the witnesses.
okay.
And the other witness was not available, and he said, "You've got to come home and sign this application to open the estate." And I said, "Dad, I'm busy, and can I wait till the weekend?" He said, "No." He said, "Here's what you do. You go to the governor. You tell him you want the state police to ferry you up here."
Oh my gosh.
And by that he means the state cop pick you up at the state house, drive you north for a few miles, or another one will pick you up, and so on and so forth until you get home, and then do the same thing coming back. Well, I did. I said, "I'll do that." So I go to the governor, and the Democrat governor, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He's a lawyer. He understands.
Right.
And he said, "Oh, we'll do better than that." He said, "We'll fly you up there."
Wow.
Well, the state police had a plane, and this governor didn't believe in planes. He was a railroad lawyer.
Oh my
Roger
gosh.
Brannigan, he was a character. And he said, "I'm going to fly you up there." So I walk, he said, "There's a state trooper will pick you up at the north end of the Capitol one." I walked out, and Bob Mahold, my friend, was out there, and I said, "Hey, you want to take a ride?" And he said, "Sure." We went out, got in the car, they took us to the plane. The plane had a dead battery. They had to replace that.
Oh my gosh.
And we flew up there, scared me to death. And there was a state trooper waiting. He took us downtown. I signed the petition. We got back in the car, got back in the plane, and flew back to Indianapolis.
Wow.
But it still was one of the scariest days of my life.
I bet. So, in your work as a legislator, what would you say was the most controversial legislative issue during your time in the General Assembly?
I don't remember one.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember anything being very controversial.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough.
The abortion law wasn't controversial.
Right.
The appointment of judges wasn't controversial. Everything just seemed to go smoothly.
Sure. And what piece of legislation did you work hardest on?
Probably the appointment of judges, I would assume.
Judicial one, yeah. And was that your proudest moment as a legislator?
Up to a point, yes, and let me tell you what that point was.
Okay.
I got all these guys appointed. They ought to love me, right?
Sure.
They got a lifetime job. Whose case is the first one they reversed? Mine.
Oh my gosh.
I was the man at 10.
I bet. Wow.
But I guess they knew what they were doing.
I guess. Wow. Man, that's tough. So, let's see, what committees did you serve on as a state senator?
Primarily public policy and the Judiciary A committee. There was a Judiciary A and a Judiciary B. The B committee them out. Judiciary A was where the good legislation went.
Okay.
That pertained to laws and judges. And I was chairman of that committee.
Oh, okay.
And I was on public policy, which was another important committee.
Right. How did you come to serve on those committees?
I didn't ask for them. The leadership gave it to me.
Okay. Interesting. So, what would you say was the biggest hurdle you had to overcome during your time in office?
Getting reelected.
Yeah.
And it failed. I got beat.
Yeah, true. What, in your opinion, would you say is the most important work of the Indiana General Assembly?
Oh, good question. I think, in my experience, the General Assembly has done a pretty darn good job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've done it because they keep their ear to the ground. They listen to what the voters want, and they try to do it.
Right.
And I think they've done a pretty fair job of that.
Okay. Good. How often did you have to work with the Democratic Party to get legislation done?
Oh, all the time.
All the time?
Yeah. But they were friends of mine.
Right. So that worked out well then. Yeah.
Yeah.
How important would you say was it to work with the other party, or was it just kind of accepted as a common thing to do?
Yes, it was. We all knew that we had to work together, and there wasn't any question about it.
Right. Okay. So my next few questions are going to be about some specific legislative issues that I saw you worked on going through your legislative history. For instance, one of them was in regard to a vote you made against a pay increase for state legislators during your time in office.
Yes.
Could you tell me a bit about that?
Well, we didn't make much money. We made $1,800 a year.
Right.
And $25 a day in session. And I didn't think we deserved, it was my opinion that you should serve for a few years and then get out.
Right.
That everybody owed something to their state.
Sure.
And that was my way of paying it back.
Okay. Wow.
And not the money.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And it was, I had a room in the Columbia Club that cost me $35 a week.
Wow.
Now, how cheap can it be,
Right. Sure. Interesting. Okay. Another piece of legislation I thought could be interesting to talk about was you voted against allowing a governor to have 2 consecutive terms. Why is that?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Well,
I can't imagine that I voted against that.
that's interesting.
Huh.
Yeah, I can look here at my notes.
Maybe I was mad at the governor at the time.
Perhaps. Yeah, let's see. Well, that's okay. We'll pretend that. If you don't remember it, then it doesn't really matter much. So.
I really don't remember.
We'll have to double check the records then on that one. So, did you have any role in any Unigov legislation at all, or?
Yes, I sure did.
Okay, just tell me about that.
I was very much for Unigov. I thought it was a great idea, not a political idea, but a great idea. I think Frank McKinney, the banker, asked a lot of Republicans to come to his office, and he lobbied for it. And I remember saying to him, I wish you'd do it in my county.
Okay.
It just seemed sensible to me
Yeah.
to not have so many layers of government.
Right. Interesting. And so, I guess the main reasoning behind Unigov for you was just to prevent sort of excess government from preventing, I guess, the legislative process or just getting laws initiated.
I think it was just, we don't need that many layers of government.
Right.
To run a city or a county or a state.
Sure. Okay.
And, I have since lived in states where they don't have townships.
Right.
Where they don't have precincts. They don't have all the layers of government.
Yeah.
And they seem to get along all right.
Yeah, okay. That's fair. And so what was the opposition's argument against Unigov?
It was a political one.
Okay.
The old city limits contained Democrats, and the Republicans were all out in the county. And if you combine the two of them, you're giving the Republicans a break.
Okay. Interesting. And so, could you describe, I guess, in a little bit more detail about your role in the creation of Unigov?
Well, I was just I liked the idea so much that I lobbied for it in the Senate with my friends. I went to them and said, this is really a good idea.
Right.
Let's do this. Let's see if it works.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I influenced them or not, but they voted for it.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Moving on to another topic, I noticed in your legislative history, it appears there were some debates going on regarding capital punishment. Could you tell me a bit about your role in this debate?
My father had a murder case, and he was very anti-capital punishment.
Oh, okay.
And he convinced me that was not a very good idea. And I just sort of took up the cudgel from him.
Right.
And sort of told people what he said.
Sure.
I hadn't had any experience at that point. I have since tried murder cases, but I hadn't.
And so, what exactly did your father tell you that had such a big impact on you?
Well, I think that mostly that he can't recover from capital punishment.
Okay.
If you find out the guy didn't do it,
right.
10 years later, he's dead 10 years.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's...
In 1974, the governor appointed me as consumer counselor of the state of Indiana. And I represented the public in utility rate cases before what was then called the Public Service Commission.
Okay.
And and I did that for 7 years.
Interesting. Okay.
And I had a lot of interaction with the General Assembly during that time.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that's another good detail to know.
Okay.
So, going back to some of your legislation, you mentioned earlier about women not being allowed to sit in bars. I read something else about women not being able to be served alcoholic beverages or something in a bar.
Well, I think that's probably the same thing.
Okay, got it.
They could go into the bars, they just couldn't sit at a bar.
Right.
On a bar stool and so forth.
Ah, okay. All right. So now moving on to life after the Indiana General Assembly. When did you? Well, I guess you left the Indiana General Assembly after 1969, correct?
Yeah, I lost the 1970 election. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so, overall, how would you summarize your time as a state legislator?
Well, I thought it was very satisfying. I was happy with it.
Good. Okay.
I thought I'd probably done my best and did what I thought was right.
What is your favorite story or anecdote during your time as a legislator?
Well, they would all be about some other legislator.
Yeah.
There was a senator. I'm sure he's dead now, but named Emil H. Schmutzler Jr. And he was a character. He was a jet pilot in the Air Force.
Wow.
He didn't pay much attention to what was going on.
Oh no.
He was a funeral director. And if somebody got up and said something he didn't like, he would go to the microphone and say, "Let me tell you, you can't hoot with the owls at night and soar with the eagles during the day." And everybody would just roar.
Oh my gosh.
And he would just let stuff pile up on his desk till it just slid off of its own weight,
Wow.
His nickname was Junie Schmutzler. He was a great guy.
Okay, interesting. Let's see. What lessons, if any, did you learn?
Well, my guess is I probably learned a lot of lessons. But one lesson I did learn was hard work pays off. The harder you work, the better you do.
Sure.
The more you prepare, the better you do.
Yeah.
And I think I saw that all the time in the legislature.
Definitely.
And I've seen it in life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Did you have any regrets as a legislator?
Only that I didn't get reelected. I wanted to be president pro tem, and I think I had the votes to do that. And then I didn't get reelected. But the truth is I didn't work hard at it.
Okay. So,
because I had a law practice to run and a family to look after.
Of course.
It's for $1,800 a year.
Yeah. That's a lot to deal with at once for that.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to future legislators or even current legislators today?
Keep your nose clean.
And what do you mean by that?
Be honest. Don't cheat. Keep your nose clean and work hard.
It's good advice. I know that you live in North Carolina now, but how has the state of Indiana changed over the course of your lifetime?
Well, I haven't lived in Indiana since 2000, so it's been 20 years.
Okay.
I've always loved Indiana. I thought it was a great place to grow up.
Yeah.
A great place to practice law, to serve in the General Assembly. I just liked the whole state,
Yeah.
north and south. And I think it's a state to be proud of.
Sure.
I think we have a reputation of being not just conservative, but practical. Practical people who do things for a reason. And not a silly reason, but a reason. And I think we have that reputation, and I think we earned it.
That's great. Yeah. Very good. Do you know if or I suppose, just in general, how has the Indiana General Assembly changed?
I guess I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
They have computers on their desk now,
Yeah, true.
I would imagine.
Yeah,
And, that's something we didn't have.
of course, right.
And they have cell phones, and we didn't have those. So the communication now is far better than it was.
Right.
Far better.
Sure.
And I think that ought to help them.
Yeah, definitely. So talking about people from Indiana and Hoosiers in general, what, if any, enduring qualities do Hoosiers still have or hold dear?
Well, as I said, I think they're practical people. They're hardworking. They're intelligent. Those are good qualities.
Absolutely.
And I think Hoosiers are known for that. I still talk to people about the word Hoosier and where it came from.
Yeah.
And nobody knows.
Right. So, my final question then, what do you want Hoosiers to know about their role in relation to the function of the Indiana General Assembly?
Well, I just want them to know more about the General Assembly.
Right.
I want them to know what it's made up of, when they meet, what they're paid, what their function is. And I don't think most people know.
Yeah.
This is a change of subject. But last night, I went to a presentation here in this building on the music of Cole Porter. Cole Porter, in my mind, was the greatest composer of modern music, and he's from Peru, Indiana.
Wow.
And I've always been proud of that.
Yeah. No, that's good. All right. Well,
And I don't hesitate to tell people that.
no, you shouldn't. That's good. That's good. Well, great.
Tell me something about you, Ben.
Well, I'll be happy to do that in a minute. I guess just before we finish off with you answering questions, is there anything else about your time in the Indiana General Assembly that you want to be said?
comes to mind right now.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'll turn off the recorders and